How bad is our association with alcohol?
It. I mean, I suppose I could say desperate but not serious, as we used to say. In truth, it's an interesting piece of history at the moment because our drinking has gone down in the last 20 years. Okay. So it's gone down from about 14 litres of pure alcohol per head of the Irish population, around about 20 per year in around about 2003 or 2001, to about just above 9 litres per head. Wow. So that's almost a third of a reduction. But the public health people and the emergency medicine people will say to you, "Yeah, it's not as simple as that." I've heard people cheerleading about that whole idea in the media in the last few months. But the reality is that the space that was emptied by people drinking has been taken up rapidly by people putting powder up their nose, drugs, and popping pills and smoking very, very strong weed. So we now have what the public health people call a dual epidemic of drink and strong drugs. Now, when I say strong drugs, I mean fairly pure cocaine, high purity cocaine, very high strength cannabis, which is associated with psychosis, and other stimulants like ecstasy and so forth. So we have a much more complicated problem than we had, say, 40 odd years ago with the drink.
And do you think people think they're moderate drinkers, but actually by the guidelines they're anything but?
Yeah, I mean, the Irish have always had an issue. I mean, the vast majority of Irish people drink. Having said that, we do have a lot of teetotalers. We have a surprising number of teetotalers. I can't remember the exact figures because the figures chop and change every year or two.
It is quite trendy now, and I hate when I say it like this, but in the younger generation. But alcohol it seems to be reducing in that population.
But Karl, my point is exactly that. Before you get carried away and say how holier than thou Gen Z is, remember they are doing exactly what the acid house generation did. In the early 90s, we noticed in the A&E departments in the UK that the youngsters were getting far less drunk than they used to be in the late 80s, for example, because in the late 80s, you had things like Red Stripe and Castlemaine 4X. The strong beers were coming in. So we saw a lot of extra drunkenness randomly in the city centres in the late 80s. But then the 90s, the youngsters were drinking far less, but they were coming in with all sorts of ecstasy-related issues, including a lot of deaths, Leah Beth's being the most famous back in the early 90s. So
while one goes down, one goes up. When we had Professor O'Gara in from
Colin O'Gara, Trinity,
it was fabulous.
Yes.
All about the impact of cocaine, drugs, and the rise in it, which is huge.
Yeah, staggering.
With regards to alcohol, so chat me through the direct impact of drinking too much alcohol on the body.
Well, I like to think about the immediate effects, the sort of medium-term effects, and then the long-term effects. The immediate effects, obviously, are drunkenness. And we all know what drunkenness looks like. So 80% of the population, let's be really sort of simplistic and say 80% of the population of Ireland drink and 80% of them drink too much. Mm-hmm. So binge drinking is where you drink more than 6 standard units 6 standard drinks in one sitting.
Which is 2 pints.
Which is 2 or 3 pints, depending on whether it's Guinness or whether it's strong or whether it's strong lager. Yeah. But like roughly, a standard drink is a half pint glass of basic lager or a basic single whiskey or single vodka. They're the standard drinks. Okay. Or a small, what people say, you must be kidding, that's not a glass of wine. Pub glass of wine.
Yes.
So they're up
to the line in the glass.
Correct.
Yes.
So by domestic standards, where we prefer a bucket to the pub measure. I mean, and people say, what do you mean that's binge drinking? I'd only have that before I go out. And in fact, we all know about the phenomenon of prinking, mm-hmm. which is where particularly youngsters have a few scoops while the girls are putting their makeup on or the guys are getting together and playing games before they head out to the club. So they're prinking, they're pre-drinking. So often by the time they actually get to the pub or the club, they're already intoxicated, mm-hmm. which of course makes it difficult for the proprietors of pubs and clubs to, in a sense, be responsible for those. They very often get accused of tolerating drunkenness. But if a young person comes in who's already basically drunk and sort of slips in the queue, it's very hard for proprietors to know about that. But that's a kind of a side issue. So drunkenness is the first thing, and that basically means you become disinhibited, you become chatty, then you become even more chatty, then you may become stroppy, and you may end up getting involved in fights or rows if you're disinhibited. And the disinhibited means the normal brake is released, and whatever lies beneath the bonnet in your brain comes out. So if you tend to be a very aggressive person, easily aggressive, you have poor anger management, well, then you can become very angry very quickly. The other thing, which is much more general, is that you will be much more prone to making bad decisions. So you may get into the car after too many scoops. You may misjudge the step on the stairs and fall off a mezzanine floor and severely injure yourself. A classic thing in clubs, of course, is people falling off mezzanine floors and sustaining spinal injuries, or actually killing people beneath them. That's classically drink-related, people falling off mezzanine floors, or falling downstairs, or slipping on spilt beer or drink on the tiling of the floors, and so on and so forth.
In the short-term issues, or on all of those things that you discussed, are impacting on the emergency departments.
Yes,
directly.
That's the thing which most impacts us. So fights, falls, and then the injuries that result from that. Now, it's very important to bear in mind that alcohol is known as the ambiguous molecule because it's associated with a great deal of pleasure and a great deal of harm. There isn't a molecule, or there isn't certainly a cell in the human body that isn't affected by alcohol. And not only that, but alcohol is not just toxic, but it's also, and this is a really important point, it's very sexist. So for the same alcohol consumption levels, women experience drunkenness and cognitive impairment. For example, the judgment is impaired, and they're much more likely to do things that will get them into trouble or misjudge the steps or whatever more quickly than men at drinking the same amount of alcohol. And there's nothing in legislation that can change that, because ultimately the effect of drugs, and alcohol is a drug, is biologically determined, not legislation determined. So no amount of legislation or debate will change the fact that because of a woman's different physiology and anatomy, she will metabolize alcohol less efficiently than the men. So there are fewer enzymes called alcohol dehydrogenase in the lining of the stomach in a woman. The amount of alcohol that's broken down in the first go around the stomach into the liver is less in women than it is in men. So by the time the alcohol gets to a man's liver, there's less of it. Women are more susceptible in terms of their brain, their heart, their liver to the effects of alcohol. And they say that as little as one drink of alcohol a day turbocharges the risk for breast cancer in women.
Really?
So,
which the prevalence is it's incredible.
Off the chart. And so in the medium term, you get, first of all, you get behavioral issues. If people drink repeatedly, they have hangovers. They either go to work and they're not really there. That's called presenteeism, where you're physically there, the lights are on, but no one's at home, or you're absent. There's absenteeism. So it's a kind of weird thing. Alcohol consumption regularly leads to more presenteeism and more absenteeism. And then you get a dodgy record at work and, and so on. Your career may begin to suffer.
Bring me to the long-term effects.
In the long term...
so if you're a regular drinker who binges or who drinks more than the government are saying you should.
Okay. The thing that alcohol is most poisonous towards is relationships. Will lead in due course to damage to relationships, damage to your liver. You start getting a beer belly. Now, a beer belly is that idea of visceral fat or central abdominal fat. And it doesn't matter if you're skinny on the outside. You can be thin, TOFI, thin on the outside, fat inside. You get
Hold on. I love that now. I haven't heard that. I love when I hear new kind of acronyms. So people love an acronym.
TOFI is a well-known acronym in sort of hepatology, where you get this idea of, look at her, she's really skinny. Yeah, that's because she drinks vodka and spritzers. Yeah? But the reality is that you can be skinny on the outside and still laying down lots of fat, because alcohol is ultimately sugar that has been fermented and to change the sugar into ethanol. and the fermented sugar gives us a pleasant buzz. Some people get a similar buzz from a sugar rush. So I often say that people in Ireland tend to be divided into the fermented sugar users and the non-fermented sugar users. People, we all know them. People who don't drink alcohol but love chocolate and sweeties. And then you have the people who drink, who never take dessert because they kind of know that they can't really have both. But they lay down the fat because they have all these calories. There's about 7 calories per gram of alcohol. And that, in a nutshell, that means that a glass of wine is essentially a donut. That's one of the ways you need to kind of think about that.
And of course, when you drink it, you don't see it, the consumption the same way.
Because of the disinhibition, the more you drink, you get the munchies. You don't say, I can't be.
Donut for a glass of wine. So we're talking a bottle of wine is about 7 donuts.
Yeah,
give or take.
And again, but this is the key thing. Back in my day, the most sophisticated wine available was Liefrau Milch, which was black tar and blue nun.
Okay.
And the alcohol level there was about 7 or 8%. But during the acid house period, as I said to you earlier, alcohol sales plummeted. So the drinks industry fought back with alcopops, which were brightly coloured, trendy looking drinks that were vivid red, neon yellow, or whatever. And what they did with them, they made them really, really sexy looking. They got designers in from the music industry or the cinema industry or the gaming industry to get them in test tubes and all sorts. But they ramped up the alcohol content from around about 4 or 5%, which was the way beers were, up to 7 or 8%. And they got the wine, and they imported Californian New World or Australian New World wines, and they ramped up the alcohol content to about 13, 14%. So you've gone from the 1970s wine, which is about 7 or 8% in my youth, now it's 13, 14%. It's very hard to get a wine in a petrol station or even a decent wine shop in Ireland that's less than 13%.
So is it fair to say then the higher the percentage of the alcohol, the more sugar that's in the alcohol, the more visceral fat you will store?
It's a simple thing. If the wine tastes particularly delicious, particularly delicious and sweet, it will be more likely to be 6 or 7 donuts.
I love you. You're going to have to stay here all day. You're brilliant. You're great. This is a great shot. Oh, okay. I love it. Yeah, so a bottle of wine, if it's very sweet, 6 or 7 donuts. That's brilliant.
Yeah, and the more we drink, the more we want to eat.
Of course you do.
Yeah.